Welcome to the next level.
Mortal Kombat is a one-on-one fighting game created by the genius minds at Midway, Ed Boon, John Tobias, John Vogel, and Dan Toasty Forden. Originally was started from an idea to put Jean-Claude Van Damme into a digitized video game due to his popularity at the time. Unfortunately, that did not pan out for Midway. But lucky for us, it did not, because that idea gave birth to Mortal Kombat. The home version of the game was picked up by Acclaim Entertainment. Both the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo versions were released in 1993. The Sega CD version didn't hit the store shelves until 1994. When you boot up the CD, immediately the infamous Mortal Monday commercial starts up, accompanied with Techno Syndrome by the Immortals. Even though the video is very grainy, the commercial was extended, and I remember how excited I was to see the video because I was crazy into techno back then. You know, the funny thing is, all the in-game footage used on the commercial are from the Super Nintendo version of the game rather than the Genesis. Why they didn't just use the arcade graphics on the intro if they weren't going to use the Genesis, that's beyond me. The main thing this version has over the Genesis or Super Nintendo, of course, is the sound and music. The soundtrack was pulled directly from the arcade, only the programmers had mixed up some of the songs, making them play on the wrong stages. Now, also because of the CD technology at the time, created problems, such as load time between fights, or load time while fighting Shang Tsung. The best part of the Sega CD version is that all the gore of the arcade was left completely intact. No need for Game Genie or the Dullard code, just boot up and get a bloodbath just like it was originally intended. Still to this day, I think the controlling is a bit clunky, not to mention they decided to change some of the combinations to pull off the moves or fatalities. This may be due to the 3-button pad, but I'm really not sure. When playing the game, you definitely want to have the 6-button pad to get the most enjoyment out of the game. With the jump to CD, the game could have been reprogrammed to look better than the Genesis, maybe even closer to the Super Nintendo or arcade, but for the most part, it was left with that dull, dark style. Even though there are a few gripes that I have about this game on the Sega CD, it's probably the best version that you can get for a home console back in the days. Now, the PC version that was also released back in 1993 is worlds better than this. It's probably the best version that you can get, but of course, that being a PC, it was quite expensive to even get it, just the PCs back then being as expensive as they were. Not to mention you had to make sure that you had a system that would actually be able to play all that. But yeah, I'd have to say that the Sega CD version is probably the best out of all of them. If you're a game collector or you're just a die-hard Mortal Kombat fan, this one is probably a pretty good one to go ahead and pick up. If you've never played it before, I'd be quite surprised, but considering if you've never played it before, I would go ahead and still pick it up. It's a good game. Again, as long as you have that 6-button controller, no problems. I mean, there are a few bit of clunkiness when it comes to the controlling, but it's still worth playing. So why don't you go ahead and pick it up? Check out eBay or any of the other websites out there that may have Sega CD games, and give it a whirl.
Welcome to the next level.